At this time, I will reconvene into open session the meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for February 6, 2023, beginning at 6:40. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. One or more trustees may participate in this meeting via video conference call. A quorum of the Board of Trustees will be physically present at the administration building, or in our case, the PC. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our board meetings are open to the public, and we welcome everyone and thank you for participating in public education. While our meetings are open to the public, this is a meeting and we have business to conduct. Disruptions will not be permitted. Anyone who disrupts the meeting or speaks when others are speaking may be asked to leave or be escorted out by security attending the meeting. We welcome civic input, but we insist that we remain respectful and civil. Thank you for your cooperation. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join Mrs. Mays in leading us in the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We now come to our open forum for agenda items. As stated on the posted agenda, members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an item on this agenda are required to register at www.aisd.net board's meeting speakers request no later than 3 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding agenda items?
No, ma'am. None for agenda items. We also do not have any speakers for non-agenda items.
Thank you, Mrs. Benjamin. Next, we will consider administrative ratifications and appointments. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Fowler, and I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointments of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal of Beckham Elementary, principal for Miller Elementary, and principal for Spear Elementary.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Hibbs and a second from Mr. Wilbanks. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Dr. Reich?
Aaron Reich, vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Justin Chop, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, vote yes.
John Hibbs, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, President Fowler, and at this time, I'd like to introduce the new principals that the board just ratified. So we'll start with Christy Wilkes, the principal for Beckham Elementary. Christy's way back there, but she's here. She's attended the University of Texas at Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in English, UNT Dallas for Master of Ed in Ed Administration. Most recently was the Dean of Instruction at Carter Junior High School, but has been the principal of Bergen Elementary School, has been an assistant principal, a literacy specialist, and a third grade teacher in Grand Prairie ISD, and has owned and operated her own child care preschool. That must have been fun. And has also taught third grade. So Christy, congratulations. Good job. Next, for the principal for Miller Elementary, Angela Robinson. Angela attended Southwest Texas State University for Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies. I don't know if you could see Ms. McMurrow over here, but she's doing, there you go. And then UT San Antonio for Master of Arts in Ed Leadership. Most recently was the interim assistant principal, interim principal, I'll get this right, interim principal at Miller Elementary, but prior to that was an assistant principal at Crow Leadership Academy. Angela has also been a principal in Northside ISD in 2 different campuses, has been an assistant principal, 5th grade teacher, 3rd grade teacher, 4th grade teacher, 1st grade teacher, and 2nd grade teacher in her past. So Angela, congratulations. Last but certainly not least is the principal for Spear Elementary, Ms. Stephanie Zavala. Stephanie attended Texas Tech University for Bachelor of Science in Early Childhood Education, Texas Tech University for Master of Education in Ed Leadership. Most recently was the principal at Goodman Elementary, has served as an assistant principal in Keller, a principal fellow in Dallas ISD, has been a science teacher, a GT teacher, K-3 math interventionist. Stephanie, congratulations.
Next on our agenda are action items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Fowler. We actually have, we moved to discussion items, the financial update.
No, we have action.
Oh, you have action? Go ahead. Okay, we'll go to action then.
Miss School Days waiver?
We'll move on to considering missed school day waivers. We want to jump ahead too far. You can't leave Dr. Hill out. Yes, you can, he says. So Dr. Hill is here to talk about the infamous ICE situation. We won't talk about that, Michael. You're going to talk about the school day waiver that we're going to submit to TEA. So, Dr. Hill,
thank you,
tell us
Dr.
about it.
Cavazos, President Fowler, and board members. Again, we're here to talk about the missed school days waiver and the whole process. Seems like we're here, it's almost a year to the date from last year.
That's right.
Okay, so the purpose, we're trying to seek board approval to request a waiver from TEA for the missed school days. As you all know, back on January 30th, there was a North Texas extreme weather conditions that made it impossible for us to attend school safely for student, staff, and the community. And so we ended up canceling school for about 4 days in order to maintain student and staff safety throughout the community. In doing so, TEA provides the opportunity for several different waivers, but the ones that we are asking for consideration today is the missed school days waiver. This waiver is granted by the TEA for weather conditions or health conditions, safety-related issues, and TEA says that before you apply for this waiver, the first 2 days must be addressed through either makeup days in the school calendar or covered by additional minutes within the school calendar. AISD, we built in the additional minutes in our calendar, and so the first 2 days are already accounted for. And TEA requires some supporting documentation, which we got situation reports from the local weather stations to submit with the waiver at that point. Again, January 31st was the day that we missed, and that's covered by the additional minutes. February 1st is covered by additional minutes. We're asking for February 2nd and 3rd to be covered by this waiver that we're seeking approval to apply for. If approved by TEA, then the students, if the waiver is approved, then students would not have to make up any of the missed days or the missed minutes again, because we've already built those minutes in for the cover of the 2. There'll be no change in the end of the school calendar for students. While we are applying for the waiver for students and the minutes, I just wanted to cover that we would also, we missed 4 staff days, and so May 30th and 31st would be the first 2 makeup days for the staff, and that's built into the calendar as it was approved last year. And then the 2 additional days that staff missed could potentially be addressed through a waiver. I'm sorry, through a resolution that y'all are considering. And so the administration recommends that the board approve the submission of this waiver to TEA to address the missed minutes for this past storm. we'll be glad to take any questions that you may have.
Any trustees with questions for Dr. Hill? All right, thank you, Dr. Hill. Do I have a motion? Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, President Fowler. If there's no questions from other trustees, I move to approve the submission of missed school days waiver to the Texas Education Agency.
Second.
Who's second? Dr. Reich? All right, any discussion? Please do a roll call vote.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes.
John Hibbs, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries in the affirmative. We move on to action item B.
Thank you, President Fowler. And we bring forward a resolution, like we have in the past, to grant paid leave for employees who were not able to work due to inclement weather. This resolution addresses the other 2 days. There were a total of 4 days, as Dr. Hill mentioned. The other 2 days that are not necessarily to be made up. And we have done this in the past before. We have 2 built-in make-up days, and we'll designate 2 for non-teachers and others to make up. But the other 2, of total of 4, the other 2 will be part of this resolution as we're recommending for the board so that the staff doesn't have to make up the other 2. So we bring this for your recommendation. You have the resolution as well in front of you.
Do I have a motion?
President Fowler, I will move to approve the following resolution that I'll read into the record, which will, of course, require a second upon the reading. This is a resolution to grant paid leave for employees not able to work due to the inclement weather, whereas on January 31st, February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2023, Arlington Independent School District, AISD, and much of the DFW Metroplex closed its campuses, facilities, and administrative offices in response to severe winter weather in Texas for the safety of all students and staff. And whereas the Commissioner of Education has stated that Texas Education Code Section 24.401C represents a legislative determination, 21.401C, represents a legislative determination that a public purpose exists to continue educators' salaries during times of emergencies, and whereas all district employees, contractual and at will, contribute to the achievement of the educational mission of the Arlington ISD, therefore be it resolved by the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees that 1, payment is authorized for 2 full days for all regular employees, including full-time bridge substitutes and substitutes in long-term assignments in all campus facilities, support facilities, and administrative offices on January 31st, February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2023, who are unable to participate in scheduled work due to severe weather, district closure, with 2 days of work time that can be made up with the assigned makeup days or accrued leave. Daily substitutes, temporary employees, and contractors are not eligible for the benefits of this resolution. And 2, the Board of Trustees hereby A, determines that these payments serve a public purpose, B, retains sufficient control over the expenditures to ensure a public purpose is served, and C, is confident the district will receive a return benefit. Dated today, February 6, 2023.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. We have a motion from Dr. Reich. Do we have a second?
I second.
A second from Mr. Wilbanks. Please do a roll call vote.
Aaron Reich, vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes.
John Hibbs, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Yep. Next item, we have a discussion item for our financial update. Ms. Moss will give us that prior to the consent agenda consideration by the board.
Thank you, Dr. Vassos. President Fowler, trustees, again, as routine for us, I'm going to give you a brief update on our financials. And we'll start with the financials that are actually in the board packet. As of December 2022, we're presenting our monthly financial report to you and our monthly investment report as of December. We're also presenting a budget amendment to you tonight, and that is as of this current month, February of 2023. We also have other items in the consent agenda, our purchases greater than $50,000, and our bids for your approval tonight. I want to start with the budget amendment, and just to share out what we're asking you to approve tonight. In our general operating fund, we've got cross-functional changes. We also have some increases to the revenue budget. We've got property tax revenue and investment income that is increasing in this amendment that we're asking for. Also on the expenditure side, we've got some budget increases. Recapture, we've been talking about that and keeping the board informed of where we are as far as recapture. We have health insurance and universal pre-K adjustments that we're asking for tonight. And we also have a budget decrease on the expenditure side. That's where we're reclassifying some of the ESSER 2 dollars. So some of the salaries that are now currently in general operating, we're reclassifying them to our ESSER 2 funds. On the debt service side, our revenue budget is increasing based on our current calculations on property tax revenue for a net change of $6.1 million. And I'll go back to general operating. We have a net change in general operating of $13.8 million. We are not proposing any changes to the child nutrition this month, and our capital projects, we only have cross-functional changes to bring to you for your approval. And I wanted to go a little more in detail on the general operating fund. I think it's been probably November since we updated the board. And this table just shows our amendments for 22-23. On the revenue side, there's an estimated $5 million increase to investment income and an estimated $3.9 million increase to our property tax collections. If you'll look on the expenditure side, on the original budget, I included them all as one amount, the $609 million that you see there, but they're broken down off to the side on the proposed amendment. Our campus carryover of $2 million, insurance premiums, both property and health insurance, of $8.4 million. Then we have our additional security needs that we brought to you back in the fall of $1.4 million. The ESSER reclassification that I mentioned earlier of 14.8, and we also are bringing unpaid student food service balances of $668,000, and then just a small amount of other amendments we've asked for of the $77,000. And also, as of right now, we are calculating our recapture expense to be $917,000 for this year. We still have not yet included our preliminary property values in that, so that amount could go up a little bit, but that's our estimate for right now. So if you look at where we are as far as this current year, we are looking at a $25 million deficit, and that is up from our, or a decrease in the deficit that we actually adopted back in June. I also want to point out other revenues. The $4 million is our universal pre-K that we're adjusting. And then our other uses, that $53 million that we brought to you back in, I think it was December, that is the excess revenue that we had from last year's fiscal year. When we closed the fiscal year in June, we had an excess. So we're actually transferring that from fund balance. It's not coming from our current year's budget. It's actually from the previous year, and we're taking that money from fund balance to help out with our capital projects. And so I always like to keep you up with the impact of our ESSER funding. For the year 22-23, we've got $5.5 million that we're estimating for indirect cost for both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, the $14.8 million for ESSER 2 funds that we're supplanting, and $7.6 million are ESSER 3 funds that we're supplanting in 22-23 for a total of $25.9 million in ESSER funding that's impacting our current year budget. And this is just another ESSER update to show you where we stand on each one of them. Of course, ESSER 1 is totally complete. We've expended those funds. As of December, we had $16.2 million that remained in ESSER 2. And again, the $14.8 million that I've been speaking to is what we will supplant. So in the next couple of months, you'll see that that ESSER 2 funding has been depleted. It is due to be spent by September 30th of this year. As of December, $87.5 million is still available for ESSER 3. And then just as always, we will give you an update on our 2014 bond. We have completed and closed out all of the projects for 2014. Those remaining funds that we have in the 2014 bond are being used for 2019 bond expenditures. We have currently $6.8 million of projects in process and an amount remaining of 1.4. We anticipate, again, that we will have expended all of the 2014 bond in the next couple of months. And then just to look at our 2019 bond, as of December, we had $391 million remaining. $263.5 million remains in bonds that have not yet been authorized. And then I just wanted to share and skip ahead to our next year. We're already in the process of developing our 2024 budget. So we kind of start with the number of employees that we're going to have for next year, the number of students that we're estimating to have for next year, and that's kind of building the foundation of our budget. Tonight, later, you'll hear from our demographer who will kind of tell you how we get that estimate on how many students we think that we may have. So I just wanted to share with you the timeline that we have and the things that the board have to do. So in January and February, our proposed budgets are due from our campuses and our departments. In February and March, our HR staffing conferences begin with the campuses. Proposed budget reviews are happening from February to March. And on April 30th, we'll receive our certified estimated values from the appraisal district. In June of 2023, we'll bring to the board for authorization of the advertisement for the notice of public meeting and the proposed tax rate. We'll also hold that public meeting and propose a tax rate for the original budget adoption. And then in July 25th, to be exact, the certified taxable values are due from the appraisal district. And in August, the maximum compressed tax rate will be determined by TEA. And then the deadline to adopt the budget for 2024 is June 30th. Or to adopt the tax rate is September 30th. And so I said that, fairly quickly. It's kind of the highlights of the big things that the board has to do as far as getting the budget adopted. But our team, our campuses, and our departments are heavily into that work right now, getting us started on the 2024 budget. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any trustees with questions? Ms. Mays?
I just wanted to make a comment. Am I on?
You are.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment. I think even more attention gathering that we got when you were talking is you're already starting on the 2024 budget. I just want to say thank you and to your department for what you do. As you said, we have to adopt the budgets. Thank you once again for being very transparent. Thank you for all the work that you and your department do. It's interesting because you're outside of the classroom, but everything that you're doing helps make whatever happens in the classroom happen. So I just want to say just thank you very much.
Thank you.
To you and your team.
Thank you. We have an awesome team. They work behind the scenes, and I'm the one who has to get up here and talk to you about it, but they do all the hard work, so we appreciate them.
Anyone? I have one question, Ms. Moss. On that slide that talked about delinquent food, I guess it's what the kids pay for lunch, food balance?
Yes,
See-
ma'am.
It was 699, or,
Yes,
There we
so 668,000 there. What that is, President Fowler, is, and it's the first time we've done it, but you can see that it's a significant amount. And so we're bringing that to you for you to amend the budget. Our food services department and Mr. Lewis and his team have calculated based on where we are right now in our negative student balances. And they've given us that amount, and our finance team and budget team have said, okay, we've got to adjust the budget for that, because as you see, it's a significant amount. Now, that is really us, hopefully, we're estimating high, but based on where we are now, we're right around $400,000 in negative balances. Based on the estimate of food services and what we're thinking we may land on, we wanted to go ahead and amend the budget based on that amount that we know.
all right, and that's students who have not paid their lunch fee or their,
Yes,
that's a lot of money.
yes.
That's a lot of money. And I know we get state assistance for free and reduced, and so this has nothing to do with that. These are separate food charges.
Yes, and actually, Mr. Lewis and his team work very closely with those students to make sure that they do not apply for or are not allowed free lunches. So they're looking at those students, they're looking at direct certifications on a regular basis to try to get that number down.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Mr. Chapa?
Yeah, so Ms. Moss, the last time we looked at the unpaid student meal balances, the high, this was well before your time, but the high was somewhere in the 190,000 range, and that was for an entire year. So is it possible that some of this is being driven by the fact that we had totally free lunches for 2 years?
Absolutely.
And a bunch of kids, just the families haven't figured that out yet?
Absolutely. That is part of it. And again, I will say that also, Mr. Lewis and his team are looking at campuses to see if they qualify for CEP so that we can get those students that we, are able to, the free lunches. But you're absolutely right. I think because everybody was free for the last 2 years, and again, if you just think about the inflation and the time that, we're dealing with right now, all of that plays a part in that number increasing.
Right, because I know, our student demographics in terms of socioeconomically disadvantaged students really hasn't changed. And the number's even a little, I think, more remarkable given that we have somewhere between 2 and 3 dozen campuses on CEP now?
I am not positive about that number, but that sounds about.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because that's really surprising because the previous high of about 190,000 was pre any campuses being CEP as well.
That's correct.
Right.
So this is good to know, and I hopefully this is the outer limit that we don't hit and it's just a one-off
Right.
thing, because we did make a commitment as a district several years ago. There was a big push. It's hard to remember pre-COVID, but this was part of the anti-lunch shaming movement, and we modified a number of our policies to be very understanding of students and not putting the district against students when it comes to this type of thing, when really this is an issue between the district and the parents. And so I would hope that we're able to maintain those policies, but do it on a sound fiscal basis, which, as Mr. Lewis back there, as we expand CEP, again, this should be less and less of a problem.
Right. And I'm going by my memory here, so don't hold me to it, but I believe that prior to COVID, we were right around $300,000.
Okay.
And so you're seeing it just increase. And again, due to the fact that we were free for everybody the last 2 years.
Does this amount include the pre-COVID 300?
No.
Okay,
no,
because I
this
thought
is
we have
just-
to charge it off every year, right?
Yes, we do. We have to, and that's why we're asking you to amend the general operating budget so that we can get that there and we kind of have a better idea of what our bottom line will be. Since the amount is, it's significant.
Okay, but you're not recommending any policy changes at this time?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Wilbanks?
Changing topics to the fun topic of recapture. The 916,000 that you are amending the budget for recapture, that's what we're accruing this year, but kind of walk through the timeline, because TA's not going to give us notification until well after the summer, is that correct?
Right.
Of what we actually owe?
Exactly. So I've shared with the board in the past kind of how we become a recapture district. So TEA actually identifies districts as recapture in July, and they send a letter out to those districts to tell them that you are recapture. They base their information on what's in the summary of finance that TEA has. We base our information on actual numbers where we run it through the revenue template and say, this is how it's looking for us based on the percent attendance that we have right now and what we think our average daily attendance is going to be. So we use that revenue template and it tells us where we are. We rarely depend on the summary of finance that TEA has out there. So we've identified ourselves as being recapture for this year. So what we will do is put that on the books to say, okay, that is an expenditure for this year. What TEA will do then is come back next July and they'll identify us as a recapture district. So we probably won't have to pay this amount until 2025 school year. Right. But what we do is we post it as a liability on our books because it is an expense for this current fiscal year.
And what are the chances that in 2025, when we get the actual bill, that it's going to be the 916? Is that going to track pretty closely, or are you?
Well, I think we're probably going to see that number increase, but we'll know and we'll be able to tell you within the next couple of months. Again, we have not, when we calculated this number, we had not received the preliminary property values. And we just received those, I think, in the last couple of days. Ms. Martin may be able to share, but in the last couple of days. So now we've got to run that through the template again to see what that number is going to be. Based on what we're seeing, it's going to increase a little. And so the next budget amendment, after we run the template, if we have the numbers from the 4th 6 weeks, we'll calculate that, see where recapture is, what it's looking like it's going to be. And we'll bring it to, if it's a significant amount, we'll bring it for another amendment to the board. But we'll keep you up to date on where we are. It depends on our student numbers and our average daily attendance and where we are.
Yeah, and when will we get a good idea on where we land on average daily attendance to know what kind of potential offsetting revenue to some of these budget hits?
That's one of those things that we need the crystal ball for because it's based on attendance through the last day of school. And so we're going to, every 6 weeks, we track that, and we're bringing that to the board. We have not yet brought forth an amendment for state revenue. We are working on that and tracking it. And so when we get comfortable with where we are after the 4th 6 weeks, it kind of we know that, attendance typically goes down. We tend to lose students as well in the spring semester. So when we get a better feel for where that is, we'll bring that to the board for adjustment too. We believe still, where you see the excess or the deficiency there, the 25.7 million, we anticipate that number is going to go down.
Yeah. I'm also quite optimistic that the number is going to go down a little bit. How much? We don't know yet, but my fingers are crossed. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Ms. McMurrow, did you still want to?
Yes. Thank you, President Fowler. I just wanted to note back to the lunch fees. We still have the opportunity as parents to apply for free and reduced lunch. That's year round. And I just, I had to verify first, but this application is still digital through AISD.net because as you stated, for 2 years, this was free for all. So if you do need, assistance and you qualify for free and reduced meals, you can apply today. And that would go into effect this school year, is what I understand, if you are approved. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, Ms.
And
McMurrow.
thank you, Ms. Moss.
Thank you. Great information. Mr. Hibbs?
Follow up on that, that number is significant, because I remember along with Mr. Chapa several years ago when we were looking at what was anywhere between about 170 and to about $220,000. That number we were concerned, but we also knew that we were writing off. It's reaching a extremely high amount. I would deem it something that it should rise in importance, that the messaging that Ms. McMurray just mentioned needs to be more than what's being mentioned here at this meeting. It needs to be going out throughout the schools, and, you know, there's a aggressive drive to get families enrolled that this is applicable to. And seeing that happen, you know, rather than saying, we hope to get there, that we have a plan in place to get there. I think that is extremely important right now, because it is hard to put the genie back in the bottle once you let it out. And for 2 years of being able, and I absolutely understand why the board did it, but you know, some people don't like that expectation, and if they are hearing right now, well, I'm not paying it and I'm not paying it, then unless you're doing something to mitigate that, it can cause, you know, something that a few years ago, $1 million was something that we were sweating as a deficit. You know, now we're seeing, you know, much higher deficits going into the school year, realizing that there's ESSER funding that's in place now that's not going to be here very much longer than September. So it's important to ensuring that you get these holes in the dam, per se, starting to be plugged a little bit. So if we can ensure that we have programming in place to qualify as many families as possible, I think it's a wise thing for us as an organization to do. I know your team is finance related, so I'm talking to us as an organization.
Yeah, so can I add just a little bit of context? So this is a generalization, but I think it's pretty accurate. This doesn't represent families or students that don't qualify. Everybody that is qualified, we have a big push. In fact, we do it automatically. This is a long story, but in our registration. So we've captured who qualifies, and that has really been sourced. There's not a group that can be mined and said, okay, let's go sign these people up for free and reduced, unless their situation has dramatically changed, which is possible. But I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. We have 75%, David, you may 76, I think, percent economically disadvantaged. We've already captured that many in terms of, but in our registration, we do an all-out. It's by default, by capturing everybody that is eligible. So it's really, I think, more the situation of, for a couple of years, there was no charge, and everybody got used to that. And I think that that's just like a lot of things in our district and other districts throughout the country. It's habit forming, reestablishing the habits, reestablishing the practices, system, but also families, et cetera, that is still catching up, would be the best way I could describe it. I don't know if, David, you have any other insight to that, but I think we've talked a lot about this because this is a big number. But it is, I think, more of a symptom of that than not capturing who's eligible. Who's eligible is already pretty much captured because the state does it automatically, and then we do it in different ways. But I just wanted to add that context.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Anyone else with a comment? Yes.
Yeah, I
Mr.
just
Chapa.
wanted to add as well. I mean, we haven't experienced this issue in a few years, but the district has lots of mechanisms to go after folks for not paying. I mean, this is not a new issue where parents don't pay for stuff. I mean, there's things like textbooks and equipment and things like that. And so, you know, I think anybody watching who thinks, well, I'm just going to keep not paying, I don't think there's that many people who fall in that category, but this is no different than anything else. There are ways to get that money back, and we have plenty of opportunities to re-educate folks and, if need be, you know, enforce our their payment obligations against them if we need to. Because the alternative to this is to go back to where we were before we adopted this policy, was that those students were not allowed to get lunches if their balance was overdrawn, and they were given a cold cheese sandwich in a white paper sack. And so that's where this came from, and I would hope that we exhaust every possible option before we go back to considering not giving a kid a hot meal just because their parents have, for whatever reason, neglected to pay their account balance. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think as Ms. Moss mentioned as well, our analysis, to your point, Mr. Hibbs, is as a system is to see if there's schools where this habit has become pretty built in. That, I think, is something that David addresses, Mr. Lewis addresses, because that's harder to start changing when it's a cluster in a school that's just simply just ignoring it, basically. So there's opportunities there that we can keep, I think, sourcing out. I think this is good that we amend it so that it's clear, because it is something we need to keep an eye on. But I also think it's one of those recalibration after COVID. I mean, I think that's probably what we're looking at right now, and other districts are looking at the same thing.
Anything else? Ms. Moss, I'll piggyback on what Ms. May said. Thank you so much for you and your team, all that you do. I can't imagine all the numbers and the columns and I deal with words, not numbers. I cannot imagine how hard that is. But we appreciate you, and I especially appreciate that you make it so understandable. You're very good about clear and concise information, very transparent for the district, what's going on, and I appreciate that so much, that you make it understandable and that you are above board with every expense that there is. So thank you so much for you and your team. We appreciate you.
Thank you, President Fowler.
You're welcome. Thank you, ma'am.
Consent.
We will now address the consent agenda items, which consist of routine items grouped together for approval as one item. Unless removed from the consent agenda, these items will be acted on at one time with no discussion. Trustees, are there any requests for items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda for further discussion?
President Fowler, I'd like to request withdrawing item H for separate consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Do we vote now? All right, we will do a roll call vote on everything except item H. We'll pull item H, so we're not voting on item H, we're voting on everything else. May we do a roll call vote?
Need a motion?
Oh, we need, oh, all right. Do we have a
President Fowler, I move that we accept the consent agenda items, all with the exception of item H.
Second.
Who's second, Dr. Reich? All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hibbs and a second from Dr. Reich. Now we can vote.
Aaron Reich, vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Justin Chop, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes.
John Hibbs, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Now we will discuss the consent items that were withdrawn.
Thank you, President Fowler. So letter H, approval of interlocal agreement between the Arlington ISD and City of Arlington and VIA for student transportation. I am in complete support of this. I just thought it was important to have just a little bit of discussion around it. This is a renewal. This isn't new information, but it might be new information for those that are listening at home. This is an example of yet one more of many innovative approaches and solutions to the needs for our students in our district, and I think it deserves just a few minutes of highlighting. I don't know the level of use of last year's. I imagine is pretty good. I don't know if that would be Dr. Cavazos, Dr.
Yeah.
Hill, somebody that would.
Yeah, so
would like-
thank you, Dr. Rice, for this. Yes, this is a very unique partnership that we have with the city. It comes about because of the need for transportation.
Yep.
And it's just that simple. And we provide a lot of transportation, but there are specific needs by students that would be very nice to have transportation, right? So they have partnered with us to provide via opportunities for students. So Dr. Hill has some information that he'd be happy to share because he works on this one as well as all transportation.
Yes.
Dr. Hill.
Yes, sir, and absolutely. Dr. Rice, thank you for bringing that and giving some attention to this. It has increased tremendously from the usage that we had in prior years, but just for the fall semester of this year, we've had over 6,000 rides.
Wow.
Totaling roughly $25,000 that hadn't cost any of our students one penny. And that's students from our collegiate high schools as well as our families in transition. And so they provide us the passes and the students use them, and it's a great benefit for us. So.
That is absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that information. I wanted my colleagues to hear this. I was interested in the information. Again, this is one of so many ways that we innovate, that go outside the norm of the public education box, if you will, not being disrespectful at all, where Arlington ISD shines for our students. And we are blessed with a city as well that is innovative in their transportation solutions for our community as a whole, and we're able to tap into that and reap that benefit for our students. And I just think that's phenomenal. So I wanted to bring that up. And before I move to approve this item, I would also say that it's just something very nimble that our district does, just like us being here tonight. I just wanted to give a shout out to Spence, Mackenzie, Frank, and the other AISD Media Services. Lisa Benjamin, everybody, to be able to turn on a dime at the 11th hour pretty much and move everything over here to have our board meeting because of power issues at the main building. Thank you. Another example of excellence at work. Thank you very much for that. So with that said, I will move to approve item H on consent.
I second.
All right, we have a motion from Dr. Reich and a second from Mr. Wilbanks. Please do a roll call vote.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrow, I vote yes.
Justin Chop, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes.
John Hibbs, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries. We now move to our next discussion items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Fowler. And tonight we bring an update to HB 3 and District Improvement Plan progress monitoring as we bring, when we have CA results, et cetera. Dr. Wirtz will be presenting this as Dr. Lopez is out tonight. So Dr. Wirtz.
All right, good evening, President Fowler, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Dr. Cavazos indicated, Dr. Lopez is out this evening, so I'm stepping in her place to share with you the results that are from the district assessment for curriculum assessment 3. So I just thought I would first start off with a reminder of what the path looks like in terms of how we're assessing students this year to monitor their progress and mastery of standards that are being taught in our curriculum. This assessment 3 in each of the content areas were district developed. So the difference between, the reason I'm highlighting that tonight is because the last district assessment that we gave was a state interim assessment, which was developed by the state of Texas. And the difference between the two is the state interim assessment really covers the breadth of the entire curriculum from beginning of the year to end of year. It's almost like a release assessment, whereas the curriculum assessments in Arlington that are locally developed are designed to follow the specific scope and sequence that teachers are adhering to in their classroom and specifically assess students' mastery around those standards that they're being taught. So tonight we're going to talk specifically about curriculum assessment 3, and those were all district created and aligned to our scope and sequence that we have adopted here in Arlington. So as we've done in the past, I will share with you the results and give you a chance to kind of go through what they look like for each of the different sub-pops, and then I will try to share with you a little anecdotal information about each of those kind of along the way. So the first assessment that I'm going to talk about tonight is third grade reading. And third grade reading, our overall goal this year to move to by 2023, the end of this year, was to move from 69 to 71. And here on this bar graph, you can see the progression of that progress through the course of the school year from CA1, CA2 to CA3. The teal color reflects the goal, and the dark blue that's inside the bar reflects the current achievement at that assessment. So in this round of third grade reading, we had a goal, of course, of 71% by the end of the school year on STAR, and currently this round of assessment students scored again at 67%. Let me just go here. This is a slide that articulates how students have done by subgroup. You'll notice some, if you look across each of the student populations, you'll notice, for example, in the all students subpopulation, we had 53% of our students in CA1 pass the assessment, and in CA2 and CA3, we had the same 67% on our way towards 71. The one point I'd like to articulate specifically around this assessment is that this assessment introduced again what we're calling TEIs, or technology enhanced items, into the test. 25% of the items are TEIs, and we've noticed, and I'll share this as we're kind of going along, that that is an area that kids continue to struggle in. In this specific reading assessment, students did show improvement in both the reading and the writing portions of the assessment, but they actually performed higher in the writing section than in the reading section. In 8th grade reading, our goal is to go from 78 to 81%, and in the third CA, you can see we achieved the 80% that was achieved in the first CA that was locally developed. Here is a table with each of the achievement levels of the student populations that are impacted by the accountability system. Also in 8th grade, similar to 3rd grade, writing was pretty substantially higher than the reading results. Most of the students in 8th grade seem to struggle with the poetry section, which tends to be traditional in our assessments over the years. The TEIs that were included in this assessment included multi-select, inclined choice, extended construction responses, and we had about 74% of our students do well on the revising portion of the writing portion of the assessment, and 55% in the short constructive responses, but it continues to be an area of challenge, these TEIs. In high school, English 1, the goal is to go from 64 to 68. In this round, we had students, about 59% of our total student population met the standard, and our goal is to go to 68. This table articulates how students did in each of the individual populations. In high school, you'll notice we're going to be talking about high school English 1 and English 2. In high school, they actually did better in poetry. That was an area of strength in comparison to 8th grade, but they did struggle with short story, which is very different than what we've typically experienced over the last 4 years. One of the areas where students tend to experience challenges, specifically in English at the high school level, is questions that were in reference to inferencing, where inferencing was required, and or where students had to support their responses using text evidence. That's still something that they're working on. There were 4 TEI types that were embedded into this assessment. They included multi-select, short, and extended construction responses. And as with the other assessments, this continues to be an area where students need practice. In English 2, the goal is to reach 72%, and our students landed at 69% proficiency on this CA. And just as with the others, their performance in writing was higher than in reading, and they also achieved better results in the revising and editing portion of the assessment. So our district improvement plan goal for reading overall is to achieve a total, a goal of 74%, which is a pretty substantial increase from the initial 2021 STAR of 61%, and currently, based on our CA3 assessment, 72% have met achievement. So I just point out in this situation, you can see while the CA1 and CA2, 69% proficiency seemed to be consistent, there was a bump in scores in reading overall across the district to 72. And this is an example of what that looks like when you break it down by sub-pop, where you all the grade levels from third grade on. I'm going to switch now over to mathematics, and I'll go through the same. This is third grade math with the goal to reach 67% by the end of the school year. Currently, based on our curriculum assessment 3, we had 63% of our students in third grade demonstrate mastery, and our goal is 67. This table articulates how students did within each of the individual student groups. The important thing to note about this math is that there are several standards that are taught in mathematics that spiral over the several 6-week periods. So we might introduce a standard in first 6 weeks, second 6 weeks, third 6 weeks, come back in the fifth 6 weeks, that kind of thing. In the assessment that we create for curriculum assessments, we only measure the portion of the standard that was explicitly taught in the classroom. So even though the standard might have many parts to it, if a portion of the standard isn't addressed in the 6 weeks that the standard is being assessed, we only assess the portion that's actually being addressed. I think that's an important part in math that's a little different. There were 7 TEIs that were embedded into this assessment for mathematics, and they did better in this round than they did in the previous rounds with TEIs in mathematics. So that's positive, which is a little different than what we were experiencing in reading. And while we're not talking about our screener data today, I did think it was valuable to note that there has been some growth in the middle of year assessments, which we'll talk about in MAP connected to mathematics. For example, in third grade, we went from a RIT score of 182 to 190.9. And while that's a little different than what the national averages are, we are showing some growth. And I do want to highlight Patrick Elementary as leading the elementary schools in terms of the number of students that are actively participating in the Imagine Math intervention. They have 73 active students on there, and they've attempted 52 lessons, and 28 of them they've passed 28 of them. So that's just something to celebrate. In 8th grade, our target is 72%, and we reached 68% proficiency, which is the highest of the 3 CAs in 8th grade math. This is the breakdown of what the achievement looked like in each of the individual student groups. TEI specifically in mathematics for 8th grade were really significantly a struggle. There was about 18% of the students scored proficiency in the TEIs in mathematics in 8th grade. They also experienced a RIT score increase in their MOI from a 215.9 to 217.3. And at the junior high level, Carter is the junior high that's kind of leading the pack in terms of implementation around the Imagine Math intervention. Algebra 1 in high school, our goal is to reach 75% by the end of the school year. This round of curriculum assessments, we demonstrated 69% of our students reaching proficiency, so we still have a little bit of a ways to go to reach the 75% target. This table articulates how each of the student groups performed on the assessment. When it comes to Imagine Math in this group, Martin High School is actually the highlight. They have 632 active students in that intervention, with an average of students finishing 5.86 of 8.35 attempted lessons, so that's good. And then this is the overall district math performance for a DIP goal to reach 70% as a whole. Right now, our overall achievement for mathematics on CA3 is 66%, and the breakdown is in front of you by each of the student groups. The overall summary that I would just like to articulate just in terms of this round of CAs for both reading and math, it really boils down to additional practices needed with students in the technology-enhanced items. They are struggling with it. We've embedded several resources into the curriculum documents that make TEIs available for teachers to integrate into their lessons, including ones that we have created for them and ones that they could create on their own with instructions on how to do so if they want to. We've also taken all of our unit assessments in the system that are part of our curriculum, for every unit that's taught, and they're all being placed, they're all online so teachers can access them, and TAs are already embedded. So the resources are there. Our goal is to continue to encourage teachers and principals to help students have more experience in the formative assessment process in the classroom, where they are accessing these technology-enhanced items because they're different this year. And that's why we're seeing just a trend in terms of CAs. They're harder this year than last year because they're having to answer questions in a way they've never had to before, and that's kind of expected. The other area of focus that we want to continue to encourage schools to focus on is Imagine Math as an intervention for students. It's able to differentiate around the specific skills that kids need, and they can do it in the classroom with their students. So we want to continue to encourage teachers to embed that into their students' school day experience and do that with fidelity. The last two areas I want to highlight today are around CCMR, college and career military readiness. Our goal is to get to 67% this year, and right now we're at 52%. As Dr. Lopez has indicated in the past, this is a number that will continue to rise as the school year goes on. And remember, the number that you achieve this year actually moves towards next year's accountability system. The one for this school year has already been locked in with the cohort that graduated last year. But you should anticipate to see this number begin to accelerate in terms of growth as the school year begins to progress, because kids will start earning points as the year finishes. And then last but not least, we have a district improvement plan goal of attendance. The goal this year is to go from 90.9 to 93% attendance. This 6 weeks, we dropped to 92.9. It's not uncommon as the school year progresses to see a little bit of dip in terms of attendance. You usually start stronger and it starts to dip. The interventions that the campuses are putting in place are to try to prevent that from happening too drastically and to start to swing back up in the other direction so that we can reach our average of 93. And that's our report for this evening.
Are there any trustees with questions? Yes, Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Couple questions about the CA1, CA2, and CA3. I just want to make sure I've got it all. So CA1 and CA3 you mentioned are district created.
That's correct.
CA2 was, which we did not see data on today, but previously, that was the state interim assessment on the state's platform.
That's correct.
So that was cumulative, but now that we're on CA3, that still was not cumulative.
No, it's cumulative up to
Okay.
what we've taught in our CA, in our curriculum. See, the challenge that people might not, that are listening, might need to be oriented around is, one of the challenges around a state created assessment that most curriculum people across the state have articulated to TA is a challenge, is that we don't all adhere to the same scope and sequence.
Right.
And so the problem is when you have a state assessment that comes sometime during the middle of the year rather than the end of the year, there are districts that are going to struggle in assessing it meaningfully with students because there are items that they'll be tested on that we never even covered yet, whereas some other districts may have. So in the difference between that and the district assessment is exactly what you said, which is we know what our scope and sequence is, and so we measure up to that point in the school year. We do it as accumulative as possible, but we don't want to create an assessment that goes on and on and on and has kids taking tests all day long. So we still keep it to a certain number of questions, but you'll find standards that were assessed earlier, reassessed to make sure that they're maintaining their mastery level, and then we introduce the new ones that were part of the curriculum.
And I just wanted to make sure I had the whole picture correct, because you're right, that was not even mid-year yet.
It was November.
Cumulative, and I kept telling the teachers I work with not to beat themselves up about the cumulative data, just look at the standards that you've already taught and go from there. But the reason why I just wanted to make sure I had the big picture correct was, in some cases, going from CA2 to CA3, we actually digressed a little bit. Any insight as to why?
No, I think that's interesting. We're still analyzing our results because we were, with the assessment, we had to extend the window a little bit this round because we had some constructive responses that teachers had to score for the first time. And so we had to give high schools an opportunity to have more time to do that. And then, so we ran the analysis in time for this meeting, but then we had a week out last week where we were struggling with that. So we're still in the process of analyzing, but we did notice that. And specifically in certain student populations, there are some student populations that actually perform stronger in the state assessment, and then they regressed in ours, and then in other situations, they flip-flop. So, yeah, it's a good question. I don't have the answer for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. And I'm curious too, if we're looking at percent approaches, like, can we go back to maybe third grade reading, because that's the one that I'm looking at right now. CA1.
Okay.
There we go. CA1 to CA3. Was the cut point to get approaches the same from CA1 to CA3? Or was it, what did it go up? I'm just curious because I want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because if I was a third grader and let's say I got 70% of the questions correct, I could get percent approaches if that's the cut point, right? But if it's CA3 and that goes up or down, that would affect our percent.
Well, yeah, and when the tests are finished and they're scaled, and Dr. Lopez's department hits the cut points, they're not. It really depends on the performance of the assessment and also which questions. If sometimes you find an assessment where certain questions don't actually perform well, and you have to throw them out. So I'd have to look to see if the cut points for each of the assessment were the exact same number of questions each time. Usually they vary a little bit here and there depending upon how the students performed on the assessment and whether the questions actually went according to plan, so to speak.
Okay. And if we could gather that,
I can do that for you. We have the cut points available. I just didn't bring them with me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No worries at all. I know that. I just thought of that. And then when you say that in many areas our students actually scored higher on the writing than the reading, that's exciting. I'm curious if that means they scored higher on the constructive response, revising and editing, or both.
So we definitely saw trends where revising and editing kids did better. The challenge in terms of the short constructed responses, I don't remember off the top of my head specifically in comparison to the revising and editing, but we did see revising and editing, they typically performed stronger than, and actually in some cases it tends to be the trend, but in the lower grades we saw they did better in that portion of the writing as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That we've talked about
Right.
this new literacy assessment just has so many components, and I'm glad that we're giving our students and teachers exposure to, because like we've said, the last thing we want students to, get hung up on is navigation of these new item types. So I'm really excited to hear that these resources are being embedded into the curriculum documents, because sometimes it's just a matter of practice, exposure. So that's all I had. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler, and I appreciate my colleagues, Ms. McMurrow's questions, a lot of the same ones on kind of the difference between CA1 and then the state assessment and this one. And, why it is concerning that we are seeing some drop, it sounds like some of it, especially at the high school level, is because of particular challenges with these technology-enhanced questions. And ironically, it seems like the older the student and the more technologically astute you would assume they would be, they had the more problems.
Yeah, and honestly, if you looked at the results of TEI performance from all the grade levels, they really struggled. And I think the challenge around TEIs versus what we typically find in multiple choice type questions is you as the student have to generate the answer.
Yeah.
And it just requires a level of critical thinking that's a lot higher. So even if you learn how to navigate the system and you can actually manipulate, you can do the inline choice, or you can do the multi-select, like you can actually do the technology portion. If you can't actually generate the correct answer on your own, that's going to trip you up too. So the positive thing is it's really assessing kids' mastery of a standard. Yeah. The challenging is it's the first time they've really been asked to do it and not given any clues to what an answer could be by other answer choices that are sitting in front of them that they may or may not choose. So it's just it's harder. It's a harder assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my question around that is, so we're struggling. What do we know about districts around us or across the state in terms of their struggles with the same? I mean, the system we're using for the online assessments is what broadly used across the state. is that vendor seeing the same kind of struggles?
I
across
I haven't asked Natalie specifically about asking the vendor, because we don't have access to like the item breakdowns by other districts.
What about-
Anecdotally, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about anecdotally?
Yeah,
with your-
anecdotally, I have colleagues that I participate in a statewide curriculum council where we can talk about it. I just haven't asked them specifically that question because we've just kind of got through our first round in the fall, and I'm just now landing on it now. But I'm gonna hunt around to find out. Even if everyone's, my hunch is that everyone is probably struggling with this because it's just new. Because when you look at even like statewide, Arlington ISD, even on the statewide assessment, the last round, outperformed most of the people in our region, most of the districts in our region. So I assume we're kind of all probably in a very similar space. The key is going to be about really working with principals and teachers and their PLCs to make sure they're embedding these opportunities really routinely into their kids' experience. And providing opportunities for kids to generate their answers on their own, which I know teachers have always done, but now there's accountability attached to it. But I will definitely inquire with my colleagues when I'm interacting with them. I suspect it's probably going to be the same.
All right, now, my final question is this, revolving the technology enhanced questions. I think back on CA1, I first asked this, and have we done any analysis or gone back to see how much of this is kids just struggling versus are there any reports of usability issues or technology or issues with bugs with those particular questions?
Yeah, I haven't received any reports specifically around their inability to navigate the system to answer the questions. We can tell by looking at the items which types of questions they're answering and which ones they're not in terms of like success rates. Just generally, they're struggling, but they are getting answers submitted. We're not receiving questions that are blank that they're not returning an answer. We're just scoring them as wrong because they're blank. So I will follow up with that question. My suspicion is that it's less about navigation and more about being able to answer correctly.
Well, and this far along,
Yeah.
the first,
Yeah,
off
the
the
first
bat,
time.
there's gonna be
There's
problems,
bumps,
right?
yeah.
Right, but this far along, hopefully those are all
Worked
smoothed out.
Yeah.
And then, you mentioned the Imagine Math intervention. So it sounds like we're seeing a lot of improvement in that, in terms of process measures on measuring the effectiveness of that particular intervention.
Yeah, so we can monitor by school how much it's being used, how many active students are on that intervention, how many lessons they've attempted versus how many lessons they've passed. We have some schools like the ones I've highlighted where they're, like Patrick's a great example, or Martin, who has 630 plus kids that are on the intervention. The number of lessons passed versus attempted, we really need to get that up. And there needs to be more consistency across the system about schools using that consistently, which we will work with them on. I think the point that, the reason why this is really important, which I think you're kind of alluding to, is the only way to really move a RIT score, which is really what you're trying to do, so that kids make growth, is they have to move faster than the pace of the year. They have to get more than a month's worth in a month. And so the way you do that is customizing their interventions. And because you're one teacher and you have 22 kids in your class with lots of different needs, this is one way to help customize it for kids. So we're going to continue to work on it, but yes, we do have a system to monitor it, and we can tell which schools are doing great and which ones need assistance.
Okay. Great. And finally, in regards to that, you called out Carter Junior High in terms of their use of that particular intervention. And I have to say, after volunteering there with church for one of their family math nights, there are some great math teachers at Carter Junior High doing some great work. And so I have no doubt that they're excelling and trying to get those kids back on track. So I just want to continue the shout out to Carter Junior High. Great work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Anyone else? No. Dr. Wertz, thank you
Right.
so much.
You're
And thank
welcome.
you for stepping in at the last minute for Dr. Lopez.
No problem.
We appreciate it.
It's like old times. All right,
Thank you so much. We appreciate you, Dr. Wertz. We will now move on to discussion item C, demographic update. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Fowler. And at this point, we'll bring Ms. Moss up to introduce our quite special guest who has adjusted schedules and all that through all this different closures and all that. But we're happy to have him here, the expert of demographics. Okay, so we set him up pretty good. But Ms. Moss, would you introduce Rocky?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Vassos, trustees. So I mentioned earlier how we've kicked off the 2024 budget. This is one of the first things also that we start to work on to try to calculate that enrollment number to get our ADA for the next school year. So we have Mr. Rocky Gardner here. He's going to show you the information that he has on birth rates and housing and other things for the Arlington ISD.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be back in Arlington ISD, my favorite and first clients. Believe it, that's not, and that's true. They are. Anderson's Elementary, still my favorite. That's where I started. Yeah, that's how old I am. I know. It's scary. So, this demographic report, the research began late fall. So our team's been looking at this data, collecting housing data, just kind of understanding what's going on. We know in Arlington right now, housing is not what's going to drive growth. Right? We're just about built out in Arlington. There's some pockets we're going to show you, but really it's just the retention of students and seeing what's going on from there. Unemployment rates right now, just kind of understanding the economy, they're super low. The jobs, jobs are kind of what's throwing things off when people start thinking about the recession, in a recession, not in a recession, on our way to a recession. We're not sure where, but right now unemployment rates are below where they were pre-COVID. So we're down there. 5% is usually considered full employment, but when you get below 5%, there's challenges trying to hire, and we've all went through that. But then the flip side of that is what's going on in the housing market. Now, this was the third quarter. The starts are in purple, the closings, which is an occupied home. This is the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So starts peaked at up over 55,000. Then you saw things start to change, and that's when the housing, interest rates started to go up, things started to dip. And you can see there that the closings and starts got so far apart that now they're having to slow down. And starts have slowed to the point now that fourth quarter data came out 2 weeks ago, and now they've switched. We're now starting less homes than we're closing. Those things have crossed, and that, I got the number there. I didn't remember putting that in there. So 45,958 starts, 46,805 closings. So now we're gonna start seeing this flattening out. We're not sure yet where the bottom is, but it is certainly gonna happen. But we were in somewhat of a unreasonable growth trend, so we probably just kind of right sizing to some extent. And what's happened too in the housing market when you look at price points. So a home that was $340,000 last January or in the springtime became a $365,000 home, but it also changed the payment because of interest rates to almost $2,800. So we've priced a lot of people out of their homes as well, and that's going to continue to be a challenge. I think that as we go forward, multifamily, there's plenty of apartments in Arlington ISD. There's a lot of movement in Arlington ISD apartments as well, so it's a very mobile community. Occupancies are down about almost 2% from year over year, but this isn't really a sign that people aren't living in apartments, because they certainly are. It's that we've added 21,000 units, so there's, so that's being spread out some. So it's not really that we're losing persons from apartment complexes. From a housing perspective, Arlington's adding about 100 home starts now. We closed 145 homes, but you can see things are slowing down. 42 in inventory, that would be homes under construction. And you can see that there's VDL, so that's vacant developed lots. Those are ready to be built on right now. And we do have about 1,000 future homes that are still kind of out there that could get built. And we got some pictures of them. But look at the starts here. We've really fallen off on starts. Just 77 starts in 2022. 137 closings. That's that inventory, that under construction stuff is getting sold off now. So we're going to see that stay pretty high. This gives it a little picture where you see colors, where you have some numbers, a little bit of activity going on, and where we are going to have some future activity. You can see that down there, Remincy and Sherrod and Sherrod? Sherry, had it right? And then, of course, Sterrett. So we do have some future activity out there, mostly infill. You can see little green dots on here. It's hard to see those, but those are active subdivisions. There's 16 active subdivisions that we would call, and about 33 of these little future pockets as well. Again, infill, we're not seeing real high yields in that new housing either right now. That's not really yielding a lot of students. But we have a couple places where we are going to see some stuff. The old Rolling Hills Country Club there, they're going to build single-family homes, about 200 or so, we think. We've got townhomes, we've got commercial property. Green Oaks Preserve, you can see there. We've got an aerial from December, so you can see where they've cut the roads. They got the lots delivered, but this appears to have paused. They've stopped advertising. We're not sure when they're going to start that up or who's going to jump in there, but when they start, it'll go pretty quick. And then we have some apartments, of course. They're still going to get built. 2,000 multifamily units are in planning stages. That means that they haven't started anything, but then we've got several projects that are already under construction in Arlington. One of them is the Landmark at Grand Prairie. Again, you can see that December photo where it's almost getting done. They're going to be leasing it in 2023. We're going to be leasing it at the Mission at Johnson Creek. You can see there the construction site. Again, this is from October. And then we have this one, it's going to be a little bit later, but the Market, Arlington is not quite as far, but they're going to probably be leasing late this year. So some more apartment complexes. Just to give you an idea, what we've been seeing in Arlington is about 2 students for every 10 units in an apartment complex, of a new apartment complex. Now, we've got some older ones, as we know, that have almost a student per home in a few of those. So it just really what's being built and what's being torn down and replaced is really changing yields. Just like it's doing that everywhere right now when they're tearing down some of that. Newcomers and leavers, so now we're going to transition towards projections. We try to look each year over year at what's happening to your students. So we look at the student ID, and if that student ID was in your district one year and not in your district the next year, we consider them a leaver. Now, we don't consider 12th graders leavers. You kind of hope that they're not going to be in there the following year. Newcomers are the same way. If we have a student ID that wasn't there last year and is there this year, we consider those newcomers. We don't include kindergarten or pre-K as newcomers. They're kind of all. But that kind of gives you that range. And what was really interesting in Arlington, now in 2021, that was COVID, 5,700 students was the newcomer number there. That dropped off significantly like you would expect with COVID. What didn't happen, though, is your leavers didn't accelerate. It actually dropped, and we didn't see that in any other district in North Texas. So you did see some people kind of hunker down here, I think, and stay. Now you're back to normal, unfortunately, right? I mean, you got 8,500 leavers in each of the last two years, that they're almost exactly the same. So we're kind of back to that normal trend. Another trend that we look at when we start talking about projections are birth rates and kindergarten students, just kind of that correlation to birth rates in kindergarten and pre-K. Now, of course, first things first, the birth rates are down. So we're seeing less children now being born. I think in 2020, there were 10,000 less births in Texas than the previous year. So it's not just Arlington. So that's why you start seeing your pre-K enrollment jumped up this year, which was great because of your pre-K, but because of the declining birth rates, we might not see that jump again. It's probably going to be, it's kind of a one-time, I'm not saying a one-time wonder, but the positive, the universal pre-K certainly impacted things. It's not going to be that same jump every year, but we did add 300 students. So that was the first positive enrollment gain in Arlington since, I think, 2012, 2013. Your forecast came in also almost 300 students over my forecast, which is how I like to be. I like to be on that side of it if I'm going to miss. It's a 0.5%, so I missed it by a little bit, but we're still, you had a really big 8th grade cohort. And that's another thing that we've been noticing since we've come back from COVID, is we're trying to understand what's the new trend. And 1 year does not a trend to make. So I can tell you, as we move forward, we didn't show a big jump at 8th grade again or a big jump at pre-K again. We kind of leveled things off. So when we talk about leveling things off, then next year you see a negative trend again. It's not because we didn't grow the district as much as it grew this year, because technically we did. But because of the changes, you've got a larger students leaving the district your 12th grade classes, your upper classes are bigger than your incoming. So you lose students just by just by the attrition. So when that kind of gets closer together, you can see in 8 or 10 years, 6 or 7 years, you might see a little bit of growth again. I think your pre-K could get over 4,000 within 5 years, really. I mean, this is somewhat conservative. I wanted to be a little conservative this year because of these birth rates, but I think your pre-K could do well. You know, and obviously your kindergarten's been almost 4,000 before too. The students are there, so I think they're going to kind of come back there. The students are there. Now this, we won't stay on too long. This will give you something to just read through when you can't sleep tonight, I guess, or something. There's lots of numbers there. In your elementary level, you can see that's where your declines float across there, pretty similar number each year. And then, of course, you have your junior high and high schools. We're very consistent. We just kind of kept it pretty stable. Really, your cohorts are pretty close to 1. So I think, you know, if you hold on to this, you get the students and hold on to them, I think you're going to be in good shape. The stuff you see at high school is always going to be there. That's not changing anywhere we go. But that's the trend we're looking at. So enrollment's approximately 56,200 primary through that universal pre-K this year in the 8th grade. We think you'll consider seeing a positive impact and will also help retain kindergarten students. I think bringing back that universal pre-K is going to have to come over to kindergarten as well. So I think that's going to be a great thing. Large exiting classes are what's causing the decline going forward, really. Those big classes you have out there. That was fast, but I'm happy to take questions, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Do I have any trustees with questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Fowler. Did your analysis, is it pretty much everything you looked at in this presentation, or did you look at some other things like, you know, what is our projected changes in students who qualify for free and reduced lunch and things like that?
We don't try to project, we don't project free and reduced lunch or race or race and ethnicity.
Got it.
We see the trends, but we don't necessarily try to project that.
Okay. Would you say that you're, you know, I was on long before I got on the board, I was on a committee that helped put together the 2013-14 bond package along with Mr. Wilbanks, and we had a presentation, I don't remember if it was from you or someone else, that said within like 6-7 years out, we were going to go from like 64,000 students almost to 70,000, and then, you know, it turned out differently. So how confident are you that this downward trend is going to continue despite our best efforts to reverse it?
You know, I would look at the 52.5 number. It's like anything, the farther we get away from right now,
sure,
that's where things can change. When you see a district that's built out the way Arlington is, it's really going to be about retention at this point. So if we can somehow get some of these students back, if we see the kindergarten trend begin the next couple of years to kind of start increasing, because it all starts at kindergarten, then it flows. So if we started getting some higher kindergarten students, we could get to 53, 54,000 in 5 years. But if we don't get those kindergarten students back, then this trend's going to continue.
Okay.
But as far as accuracy, it does, I'd say, you know, the next 2 or 3 years. Each year I try to be within 1% for next year, and then it gets skews a little bit after that.
Okay. What is your best guess as to why we're seeing a bump in our 8th, 9th grade year?
I think some students come back from charters. I think they come back for programs. I think we're seeing that. And we're seeing that in other districts as well. A lot of times we'll see it even like 6th grade, right after elementary school. They come back and they come back in that 6th and 7th grade so they can start doing extracurriculars and stuff. Okay.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you work with other districts like Arlington in the sense that your other clients, they're built-out districts?
Yeah, we work with a significant number of built, from anywhere from Plano to Louisville to Grand Prairie, Austin, Round Rock. So significant. Spring, Aldine, some areas that are similar, look a lot like Arlington with lots of apartment complexes.
Are they experiencing sort of a similar downward trend in enrollment?
Yes, but some more significant, significantly more significant. I think Arlington's actually done a really good job, compared to what I'm seeing in some other districts of similar, these suburban type districts. And a lot of them are seeing much larger. We've got some districts that have like almost 1,000 students difference between 12th and kindergarten. So they're losing significant numbers each year.
Okay. Have you worked with any that have managed to reverse that trend?
I haven't seen it recently, but COVID has changed everything. You know, COVID's, right now, we don't know what the trend is, because I think COVID's created new trends. We've got probably more homeschooling students than ever before, because we're not seeing it in charter. Charter's kind of leveled off. They didn't really even grow much last year. It actually went the other way. So there's something going on with parents, you know, we lost 120,000 students. No, we lost, that sounds terrible. There were 120,000 less students enrolled the year after COVID than previous years. So we thought we'd bounce back to like 200,000 students, because we were growing 60,000 students a year. So really that was like 180,000 student drop off. And only 50 of those, about 50 to 60,000 came back. So there's over 100,000 students that didn't come back to Texas schools. And those are the ones we're kind of gradually seeing come back, I hope.
Well, I know it's something that's part of our strategic plan and that we're really concerned about is managing our enrollment. That was the slide, we managed to turn it around this year. But it does seem to be part of a state nationwide phenomena that public schools are going through. But it is good to hear you say that you've seen other districts in a similar situation and that we seem to be on the better side of managing that trend. So
I think you are. I think you're getting some students back in Arlington too that have left and come back.
Okay.
We've seen that with some, because we geocode students for all of our clients. So I can look at students that go to school in Grand Prairie but live in Arlington, or go to Arlington and live in Grand Prairie. You know, so we kind of start seeing that, and we start seeing these trends reverse and say, okay, that's stuff that was happening isn't happening anymore.
Well, and I'm glad that we had the presentation, because I think this is something we're going to have to stay on top of, because with our 19 bond, and I know we're not talking about bonds anytime soon, but something that we have been made an effort to be very strategic about is, as our footprint shrinks in terms of enrollment, what strategic moves do we need to make with operations, programming, facilities, and so, you know, if this trend does work out, I think we are going to have our work cut out for us in the future in terms of, you know, how do we continue to manage our footprint given the number of folks we serve.
That's been a change since COVID. We work with a lot of clients. We help clients with the boundary work when they're opening new schools that are growing. They need to redraw boundaries. But recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've worked with many schools that are districts that are going the other way too.
Yeah,
so
we've
it's definitely
consolidated
changing.
a few campuses as part of this last.
Yeah, we've done that here too.
Yeah.
And I think just real quick, to the credit of board and community and planning, in our efforts to consolidate, we have been ahead of that trend. Other districts are really struggling to manage facilities that are underutilized. And with the building of Thornton and Berry and consolidating schools, has really helped that trend of efficiency at the same time that we see other trends happening in our community. And I think, again, that speaks volumes to trying to stay ahead of this trend in an efficient way that serves our students well.
Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler. And Mr. Chapa, answer your line of questioning to Rocky. Our commissioner was on the radio today talking about this exact topic, that throughout the state, we're seeing large drop-offs in students to charter schools and, more importantly, to pods and homeschooling. And, it is good that we're seeing in our area through our 8th and 9th grade that we are seeing people dipping their toes into charters and surrounding districts and deciding to come back. I know as a parent who know families who have done just that and talking to principals, they are seeing a lot of that. Maybe trying a charter and then coming back a year later, deciding the grass was not really greener on the other side of the fence. And I think that's also a testament to the great product that we put forward here in Arlington ISD. So my question to you, Rocky, is given what the commissioner said and the trends that you were noticing, how much have you factored the homeschooling trend? I know it's very new and was accelerated, that acceleration we saw from COVID was specific to COVID, but how did that factor into some of these numbers in the chart that you see here?
Yeah, so what we've done is, 2019 was what I would call the last normal year we've had for several years. And then
The
2020,
halcyon
of course,
days.
was not. And then, so last year was the big, we thought would be the big bounce back year, and it was not. So 21, 22, 22, 23, we kind of have 2 years now that we're gauging things on. And what we're seeing early on is that we're not finding a big bounce back. So we're seeing some lower cohorts at kindergarten than what we saw back in 2019. They don't appear to be bouncing back right away. And we're seeing a big jump at first grade in a lot of places, which means private kindergarten might have become more attractive, or homeschooling kindergarten, and they're coming back again for first grade. So we see that cohort growing. So that's what we've been doing, just kind of looking at individual grade level cohorts and seeing if we have a trend beginning. You know, it's just maybe next year I think next year we're going to have 2 more. I'm kind of almost throwing out 21, 22 as well, because we just didn't see it come back. So now I'm thinking, okay, we got 22, 23, 23, 24. Things are going to settle in, and that's kind of where we're using those historical cohorts. It's been hard.
I don't envy you.
This is my first pandemic, and I'm hoping it's my last. Yeah, that's right. So, hope it's my last.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Mr. Hibbs?
Yes, thank you, President Fowler. Beyond just the charter, and we have the homeschool, did you look at the growth of the private sector itself? They're next to impossible to get data from. They don't have to share. I appreciate that, because I believe that, I know that's the case. Nobody likes to give out those numbers, but yeah, I see growth of their campuses, so I'm assuming that's correlating with growth with students. I was served on the board first when we were at 64,000 students, or pushing 64,000 students. So seeing the potentially in the next 5 years to 27, 28 to 52.5, that's troubling, because we've built schools, we've built these type of things, buildings and programs, and we have to recapture the student. And I know that at the same time, there are certain communities that grow out. I know my particular community that my kids grew up in, first established in '85, and then all the kids graduated through, and now new families are coming in. I know that that's cyclical, and it goes throughout the entirety of the community. I think as a board, the reduction is troubling, and I do believe that that 8th grade bounce back is something that I've seen for quite a amount of time, because there are people that want to get into our programs, especially programs like that we have. That is either the early college, high school, that kids have to begin to apply to the STEM academies that we have, those type of things. When you talked about the kindergarten, you see there's a positive trend there. Are you lumping, it's just for my knowledge, are you lumping in our new pre-K programming with kindergarten?
Yeah, just to be clear, yeah, there's the positive trend that I see that can happen in kindergarten is because of what you're doing in pre-K.
Okay.
I think bringing those students, and then we can hold on to them.
Yeah, I think that we're bringing
in theory, there's as many 4-year-olds as there are 5-year-olds out there.
Right.
So that difference is what if we can get both of those up to that,
So what I find in your data is something that, okay, yeah, you can take it as, boy, we're into further consolidation within our district, but at the same time, it gives us real opportunity to see how we can address and mitigate these changes. Are there opportunities to recapture these students from some of the other schooling opportunities that they're taking, that's out there, and that they're the kids are looking at. So, you know, I think that as a board, we look, okay, what is it that is drawing some of these people to these programmings? I think that with the academy process that we've done, that addresses a considerable amount. But we continue to look at those type of opportunities to say, okay, how do we take this one more step? So I appreciate the information that you bring, because I believe it is truly valuable. But it does put the onus on this board and our administration to really know that this is going to be a challenge. Because with the loss of these children, also come the loss of your revenues. And the revenues, we know, are going to be what's challenging for public education going forward. So again, I appreciate it, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbs. Yes, Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Fowler. Mr. Hibbs brought up some great points there, and I want to tie this in because we're going to do our legislative visit soon, and I want to tie this into our legislative agenda. And of course, there's a challenging dynamic right now because the Texas legislature is meeting, and that's always a scary time for school districts. And so who knows what's coming down the pipe that would affect the finances that Mr. Hibbs talked about, but something that's getting a lot of traction this year, which in previous years has sort of been, you know, talked about, and it's more of a talking point, is vouchers, or as I heard them called the other day, education savings accounts. And Mr. Hibbs's point on, well, we don't really know, and your point on, we don't really know and can't track who's going to private school and who's going to private school and coming back, because they, private institutions, for perhaps many good reasons, are not subject to the same transparency rules that public schools are, including charter schools. And if we're going to have a dynamic, in my opinion, where we have public money being used to go to private schools, I think at a bare minimum, something that, you know, we have to communicate to our legislature is that lack of transparency has to change. And, you know, we're graded on so many metrics, and those private schools often are not. And in a few studies that have been done, in some cases, those private schools are actually, despite perception, producing or providing a less quality service than many of the public schools are. And so if we get into a situation where we do have to deal with vouchers, I mean, I think this is, I hate to say, perhaps an optimistic view of the future, but having access to that data, I think, is going to have to be paramount, where if you know, public money is going to be used, we have to have an accountability system and transparency for the use of those funds, or otherwise we're going to be in the situation now where we have many private schools who are, you know, they may be providing quality services, they may be coasting on reputation, but we don't know. And we don't know how many students are going there, how many students are coming back. And on the point of they're coming to us, obviously, there's a big incentive for students to come to us in 9th grade now because of the programs that we have built out that private schools and many charters can't provide. You know, sometimes we're getting students back who are actually not prepared for the rigor of our high school curriculum because of an inadequate education up to that point. So, I mean, when we go to Austin, I think this is something that we need to make clear is public schools, school districts like us are across the state dealing with a very, you know, unknown enrollment forecasting environment, and that is something that is going to have to be taken into account if they are serious about passing vouchers, is we're going to need access to that information.
Absolutely.
Can I?
Oh, please.
Point is it's more than just even the accountability of disclosure of the students that are at these schools, but it's the standards of accountability that
Yes.
public schools are held to that our privates and charters are not.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing that we need to reinforce with Austin and their understanding. Hey, if you want to do this, make sure that you put the very same standards upon these schools, because I think that will give the public a real understanding of what is actually happening or not happening.
Right. And John, I remember when I first got involved in the school board, you and Tony Pompa were very fond of saying, measure what you treasure. And this is a situation potentially where you have government money being thrown down a black hole that you.
Exactly.
And that seems very counterintuitive to me, and it's certainly not how we operate. And I hope that gets fixed.
Right.
Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler. And I want to jump back to the thing you guys touched on earlier about the need to counteract the downward trend. And if I can put on my product manager hat, it all comes down to building a product that your customers want and providing the kind of service that instills their loyalty. And I think that's something we've really done well over the last couple of years, is providing the kind of programs and the products that our parents are demanding our students deserve. We need to do more of that. And if we want to reverse this trend, we got to realize it's a competitive environment now, with now home pods as well as charters and private schools, and we've got to compete. And I think we're doing that. We've got to continue to be lean and efficient in terms of our facilities, but it comes down to providing a product that parents are demanding and that our students deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Ms. Mays?
Thank you, President Fowler. And I definitely strongly believe that AISD not only is providing that excellent service to our students and different opportunities, but we've been doing it for a while. And we will just continue to do better and to make sure that we're servicing the students that we do have here to keep here. But the question that I want to get to is, and it may not be a question for you, and thank you for your presentation, but with this information, how deep of a dive do we do as a district? For instance, as I was noticing the places where you were showing where either new homes or new apartments were coming in, and I'm really speaking of the area where I live because there's lots of them coming in, and some of the places aren't really made for large families. They may just be for, first-time homeowners. They may just be places for drawing attractive for single, working, young people. And then across the street, there's for the 55 and older population. Do we do a deep enough dive to see, are those the type of places that are being added? Because normally if that's the case, it's probably not going to bring the number of students that we're really looking for. And or for the places just bordering, for instance, Grand Prairie and the Mansfield-Fort Worth area, where they're adding the proximity of schools in the other ISDs are so close, even though they're building all that, they very well could matriculate to another place. But I guess my overall question is, how deep of a dive do we do? Because I don't want us to be searching for rabbits and holes that really aren't there. Really want us to focus on what is truly can we capture back, and not just trying to create more things that maybe we don't need.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it. We go down to the level of grade level per school. So all these demographic projections are built so that we can project staffing, that's one, down to the grade level per school. So that's to that level of detail. In terms of housing, Rocky has a pretty stable formula that has generated how many per apartment and type of apartment, how many
Right.
students, but you can provide
So
more
we
detail.
track what we call yields. So we know what a typical apartment, a market rate apartment or a luxury apartment, how many students that's going to yield. Like when I was saying about 0.2, the new stuff yields very low, even 0.1. It's because they're building a lot more one bedrooms, a lot fewer two bedrooms as well. So we're kind of watching that. And the housing's in a similar way. The new housing is not, and we geocode your students every year. So even existing neighborhood yields change. I think we were just discussing that as well. And we kind of watch that too, because you can see, as homes turn over, that's a target I think for y'all. When a home turns over, you can get the word to them that's, something's beginning to yields, because those neighborhoods are going to begin to grow again, we believe, because of affordability. Arlington's going to have some regeneration, and that's my hope, is that we could maybe, that's what I'm saying, if we could get down to that 53, 54, and then maybe hold up that, you know, and start seeing it turn a little bit. It's gonna be, get the kindergarten students, get the kindergarten
Yeah,
students.
so we projected by, Rocky does by campus, and then our research and accountability, Dr. Lopez and her staff, they work closely, sometimes they argue, but we won't talk about that.
Right.
Sometimes
Always
they calibrate together to come up with the projections, because they use different formulas and things, but we do all the way to the grade level per school. And up until we added the universal pre-K, they're pretty spot on, and we like to hit the target
Yeah,
over than
we tend to be
Rocky.
more conservative, so
Yeah.
my hope is that I don't, you know, and that's the concern right now too, is that I hope this is low.
Yeah, he tends to be pretty conservative, which is good, and we're pretty stable. The universal pre-K bubble that we've talked about before, if we can hold on to them in kinder, then, and first and all the way through, it becomes a bubble that you can keep growing. But to your point, that number is already, I mean, we've captured the pre-K to a large extent. Will we capture it again next year? That's where he levels it down.
And if the little ones, if the babies aren't there, then you can't capture them.
That's
So
the-
that declining birth rate's also a challenge. So we just got to hold on to that 90% of that, you know, get that up in those 90%. I think you'll do well.
Because the birth rates are a whole different discussion, but it's a factor for the whole state of Texas as well. That's
Yep.
part of the commissioner discussion, was birth rates, and which, just to kind of close the loop on that, this is why they have a surplus, because they had budgeted for a large number of students in the state of Texas, and they didn't during COVID, so there continues to be a surplus, just to be clear where the money is.
Yeah, very good, and that's kind of one of the rabbit holes I'm talking about. We can't create kids. Although I'm hoping my family will be adding some students very soon. Just saying.
Yeah, right.
No pressure, just saying. Thank you, Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Gardner, so much.
It's a pleasure.
And we'll watch those predictions. We're hoping that they're going to go up a little bit, and we appreciate all the information that you gave us, and talking about apartments and homes and showing us everything that you did. Thank you so much for your research, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're going to continue to do some work with your team this year anyway, too.
That's right.
So
Great,
thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
It's time now for the superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Fowler. And just a couple of items. We could talk about snow days and all that, but we won't. We're going to talk about a couple of neat items here. So students at Larson Elementary, and you'll see them, and I think Ms. Mays was able to join, but students at Larson Elementary and Barnett Junior High got a great surprise before the winter weather with Cade Cunningham visiting both schools. If his name sounds familiar, it's because he was the #1 overall pick for the 2021 NBA draft. He also just happened to attend Larson and Barnett Junior High and freshman and sophomore years at Bowie High School. In addition to visiting with students at both schools, Cunningham debuted Cade's Closets, which were made possible by a $10,000 donation from him to each school. The closets will be supplied with hygiene products and non-perishable snacks for students. So thank you to him and to our entire community for that effort. So congratulations to those schools. Another visit came to the Center for Visual and Performing Arts by Darian Sanders, who plays Simba in the Disney's national tour of The Lion King. He spoke with students in Courtney Mills' modern contemporary dance class. While Sanders isn't an Arlington ISD product, just to be clear, he has a connection because the district, because Ms. Mills taught him back in 2005 when he was in the marching band. He spoke to the students about perseverance and sang a couple of songs. If you remember, the Arlington ISD Education Foundation was the recipient of one of our Texas Rangers legacy grants last year. So that $100,000 grant was earmarked for pre-K outdoor equipment, and you see the pre-K students there. They got their first use at Peach Elementary. They got a sneak peek at the hula hoops, basketball equipment, baseball equipment, and everything else they'll be using outdoors this spring. If you're interested in coming to a pre-K classroom, you're always welcome. Every elementary in the district will have this equipment around spring break. Thank you to the Texas Rangers Foundation one more time. I want to commend everyone who, in our school district and our school leadership department in particular, who made the work of putting on the Glitz, the very first event for teacher leadership at the CVPA. More than 700 teacher leaders from the district were honored in this red carpet event. Teachers were fed and they were commended. And I just want to thank all the teachers and principals that could make it to this event, and thank the teacher leaders one more time on behalf of our entire district. All right, so Lamar High School is in a can't-lose situation in this Sunday Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs have former Lamar football players on their rosters. The Eagles have the rookie linebacker, Kyron Johnson, and the Chiefs' number 3 quarterback, Shane Buechele, the son of Steve Buechele. While it's great for Lamar, it's also great for the district because it means we'll have a Super Bowl champion on our roster for the 2nd straight year. Because last year, 2 members of the Los Angeles Rams were Arlington ISD products. So congratulations to them. Look forward to that game. So that concludes my report.
Any trustees with reports? Ms. McMurrow?
Do you have one, Ms. Fowler?
No, I'm going to do
Okay,
mine.
okay. Thank you, President Fowler. A couple other trustees and myself had the pleasure of attending the Kindness Campaign's Year of Kindness kickoff, and that was a collaborative effort between that organization, which includes many of our Arlington ISD educators. I want to especially highlight music teacher Mr. Rosales from Corey Elementary. He and his music students are working on composing their 2nd original song about kindness, and this is just one of the many efforts to promote kindness going on around our school district. It was an inspiring evening. Thank you. Oh, one more thing, sorry. This week is National School Counseling Week, and I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our school counselors. They truly make a difference in the work that they do because they touch lives. I know that I personally have been impacted by school counselors in Arlington ISD as a child growing up, and my son as well. So shout out to his school counselor, Jackie Redmond at Little Elementary, and all of our school counselors that work so hard each day. I don't see how the wheels can turn without them. They are such wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow, and I totally agree with our counselors. We have the best of the best, and I don't think our teachers or our students could function very well without our counselors. So thank you for bringing that up. Mr. Hibbs?
Yes. I am needing to actually dart out here very quickly, but I would be remiss because I know that Dr. Brown is here tonight, and I just wanted to say to her personally, Dr. Brown, you have been an inspiration for so long. Thank you so much for your service. Godspeed, and wish you well in your new endeavor. I mean, I know that you're going to excel. So just know we really so appreciate you and everything that you've done. I'd like to echo what my colleague said earlier to Dr. Moss, to Dr. Wirtz, to our fine HR department, Dr. Hill. You guys make this district run so well. Our board is indebted to you. I like to think last month we were appreciated. I just want to share with you our appreciation back to you because you've worked, like titans, especially through this last week and the ice and everything else that we encountered. So I appreciate that. We had an announcement by Dr. Cavazos too, and I just want to share with and make sure everybody knows it's clear. We love this man, and he's been incredible to this district, and it just shows through the leadership that we have here. With that, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbs. Ms. Mays?
I'll send you a script, Mr. Hibbs. So February is the month that is set aside through proclamation to celebrate Black History Month. Over the last years, I've had the opportunity to discuss my own personal challenges in my family, accomplishments of African Americans, all the firsts for African Americans as that still continues today, and the many contributions that have been made by African Americans to current date. And that purpose was to bring about awareness and understanding of how the past can influence our future. And I know we're all hoping for a better future. So today, what I'd like to do is invite everyone to go to the AISD website, to their children's school, and see what Black History program is being performed there, if any, and please attend. If there's not one at your school, please go to the AISD website and find where another Black History program is going on at another school and go and attend there. To see our students celebrate through words, poems, dance, music, essays, etc., is a very exciting way to celebrate Black History Month as they pay tribute to all the generations beforehand. So the quote I would like to leave, and this is also part of Counselors Week, very fortunate to work with many counselors in the schools in my area, and I get opportunity to speak to some of the young females in particular, but also some of the males, and this is a quote that I share with them quite often. One of the lessons, and this is Michelle Obama, because I'm going to say me, but it's not really me. One of the lessons that I grew up with was to always stay true to yourself and never let what somebody else says distract you from your goals. And so when I hear about negative and false attacks, I really don't invest any energy in them because I know who I am. That was from Michelle Obama. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mays. Could I ask Dr. Tracy Brown to come to the podium?
Yeah, or she can give it to me. Yeah.
It's a sad moment for Arlington ISD as we say goodbye to Dr. Tracy Brown. We are so honored that we had the opportunity to work with you and to see all of your achievements on behalf of our students. There are so many things that Dr. Brown has been a part of that stand out, but nothing more than commitment to developing our leaders here in the district. From first participating in Holdsworth to laying the foundation for our Aspire program, your work has truly made leadership opportunities a reality district-wide. Your commitment and your passion around all of our equity initiatives is deeply appreciated, and the foundation you laid will continue on in our district for years to come. You are an exceptional leader, Dr. Tracy Brown. We sincerely thank you, and please know that you will be deeply missed, but the good work you started will continue.
Thank you so much. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. What a joy the last 8 years have been in Arlington ISD. And so, this is not goodbye. This is just see you later. We'll see each other in a different capacity. The last 8 years have been amazing. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to express my leadership and bring innovation to the district in a different capacity. If we are a little bit better off because I was here the last 8 years, then I've done my job. So thank you all so much.
And with that being said, we are adjourned.